only place for everything Vikings. 6, 1, 2, Vikings.
Welcome back to the 612 Vikings podcast. I am Dustin alongside Drew, and as you guys can see on the YouTube audience, we have a special guest. We have Mike Wobschall, aka Wobby. And Wobby, if you want to introduce yourself for those of you that don't know you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, guys, for having me on. Fun to join you. And an appropriate day to do it for our first time, right? With all the news and action happening. Yeah, man. It's been fun so far, and I'm sure there's more headlines to come here tonight. And I think a lot of us, I don't know if you guys are in this camp, but I'm crossing my fingers for the Vikings for Jonathan Allen, who is supposedly in the building. And there's some ties there between his agency and Minnesota, of course. So I think that thing's going in the right direction. But yeah, man, 15-year member of the Minnesota Vikings content machine, the Vikings Entertainment Network. I left in 2019, but I kind of keep my toe dipped in the water a little bit on social media, and then I have my own podcast as well. So it's called Believe in Vikings, BLEAV, Believe in Vikings. And it's found wherever everyone finds your guys' stuff as well. I'm sure the major podcasting platforms and YouTube. So that's fun. But what my favorite thing to do, and always has been, even when I was with the team, is, exchanging ideas with fans, exchanging ideas with other content creators like yourselves. It's not about being right. It's about getting it right. And that's why this time of year is so fun. Free agency. There's just so much happening all at once. We all had predictions and prognostications, and now it's time for us to wait and look and see what other teams actually do instead of predicting what they do. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, I don't know about you this morning, but Twitter was down for a lot of people, down for me, and it was just so frustrating. It was almost like it was timed right, because we get free agency frenzy on this beautiful Monday, and we can't even see who was all signed until an hour or two into the damn thing.
The weirdest thing for me was I experienced that as well. But I would get notifications on my phone.
Yeah.
The notifications would come through, so I could see part of Schefter's tweet or part of Rappaport or Pelissero or Garofolo. I could see part of their tweet, but then I couldn't see the whole thing. Then I'd go into the app and try and refresh, and I got the spinning ball of death. And yeah, I experienced it too. And it was pathetic how frustrated it made me. It was really pathetic, but eventually we all got back online, and then the day flowed as normal. But it harkened me back to the days where you just had the bottom scroll on NFL Network. That's all you had, right? And we're a little spoiled now with how fast we can get information.
Right. And not only just that first part of the day where it wouldn't work, but it would be back up for a couple seconds. But once you hit that refresh, it'd be gone again. So
yeah.
Other than that, I think our first news of the day was that Jonathan Allen was in the building for his visit, which not a lot of teams really do anymore. But Jonathan Allen, 30 years old or somewhere around there, good defensive tackle, not what he once was, but how do you think Jonathan Allen will improve this Vikings roster, especially on that defensive line?
Yeah, I think I don't want to take anything away from Bullard and Tillery, because I think those guys were solid players. And if one or both are back in reserve roles or co-starter roles, I think that would be okay. But I think the best way to sort of illustrate it, guys, is Jonathan Allen can consistently do what Bullard or Tillery's 85 to 95% would be. He's doing that all the time. And so it's not that what the Vikings had there last year was insufficient or not good enough. It was okay. It was good enough. But it's what they would do at their peak, Bullard and Tillery, Allen will just always do that. So I think it's a big upgrade. There are concerns, I think, in terms of age, wear, and tear, and I think a shoulder injury from Jonathan Allen. There's obviously a reason Washington decided to part ways with him. But just because someone parts ways with you doesn't mean that you're a misfit for everybody. You were just a misfit for them, right? And, I think you can say the same for maybe a Garrett Bradbury. He's probably going to lose his job to Ryan Kelly, who I'm sure you're going to bring up momentarily. Doesn't mean that Garrett Bradbury can't play. It just means his time has come to an end probably here in Minnesota. And I think that's what happened with Jonathan Allen. Now, I don't think Jonathan Allen left, was a deficient player, and that's why Washington decided to get rid of him. I think it was a confluence of factors, including salary, age, and maybe some decline. But I think it'd be a great signing for the Vikings. It would beef up their interior, and they already have great players on the edge, and it would really complete the defensive front. And then I'd still think they can use an early draft pick on an interior defensive lineman to put next to Jonathan Allen. So I would be a 2 thumbs up on the signing if it happens.
Yeah, and I feel like you kind of
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I feel like it kind of it's kind of like leaking towards their interest towards Will Fries as well, just because you kind of have that chemistry of having the guy you're familiar with on the left side. And then obviously it's really easy to work with a guy like Brian O'Neill as well. So, I still think there's a lot left to come to. I think the Ryan Kelly is just kind of like a prelude of what could potentially be, is a lot of Vikings fans are looking at with the right guard situation too.
Yeah. I think with Ryan Kelly, again, I think he's around the same age as Jonathan Allen. So you're not getting a guy off his first contract in the middle of his prime. You're kind of getting a guy toward the end of his prime, on the back nine, as they say, but still a significant upgrade from what you had. I think it's like virtually the same thing. Like, you're getting every single snap from Ryan Kelly what Bradbury could give you 1 or 2 snaps a game. You know what I mean? So, and I wrote about this on my Substack and talked about it on my podcast, and I'm sure you guys have talked about it as well. The Vikings absolutely needed to get better on the interior, and I, reading between the lines, felt like Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah absolutely knew that from their combine quotes. I think they knew they needed to get tougher in the trenches based on what they were saying at the combine and based on what happened to them at the end of the season with the Lions and the Rams, where they, quite frankly, they just got beat up on the interior. So I think they've definitely made strides forward in those 2 areas, offensive and defensive lines, so far in free agency. And I think there are more strides that they are going to make, both free agency and draft wise.
Yeah, it all starts in the trenches. If you end up signing a guy like Jonathan Allen, don't let him leave the building. And then you get a guy like Ryan Kelly, and then possibly a guy like Will Fries too. It all starts in the trenches, and you kind of build upon your team after that, because we're going to allude to Isiah Rodgers next here, and a good pass rush will open up for good cornerback play too, or good defensive back play. So
one more thing too, on especially as it pertains to the offensive line guys, I think one thing that's key is, like, Blake Brandel and Ed Ingram, they're on the roster. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with them, if they're going to get released or restructured or just stay where they're at. Not sure. But let's say you hang on to both of them. The great thing is you sign Will Fries and you draft someone in the second round. You trade back and get a second round pick and draft a guard, or you sign Will Fries. Like, now you're taking a starter like Blake Brandel and making him one of your key backups, so by making that one move, you're not just upgrading your caliber of play from the starter, but you're also upgrading the caliber of backup you have, because you're not simply replacing someone by signing a free agent. You're supplementing the roster with a free agent signing. And so I think the Vikings are in an advantageous position from that standpoint when you look at the guard position. I don't think Ed Ingram should start, but I don't think you need to cut him. I don't think Blake Brandel is an elite starting player, but I think he can compete to start. And if he loses that competition, I think you have a top-notch backup. I just wanted to throw that in there. As for Isiah Rodgers, another guy I wrote about before free agency started, and actually the one who kind of turned me on to him was former Viking safety Anthony Harris, who was talking about him after the Super Bowl, telling me about how versatile he was, how tough-minded he was. Can play inside, can play outside, can play on teams. I'm like, I'm going to take a closer look at this guy. And I think Anthony was right. I think that position flexibility is something that probably appealed to the Vikings. And I think he makes the cornerback room better. I still think the Vikings can draft a corner. And I think if you go into camp with a Byron Murphy Jr. re-signing or another free agent signing at corner, I hope it's Murphy Jr. But let's say you go into camp with Byron Murphy Jr., Isiah Rodgers, a healed Mekhi Blackman, and maybe like a 3rd or 4th round pick. I think that's a pretty good group at corner.
Yeah. I would like Byron Murphy to be re-signed by the Vikings. I don't know how well that's looking right now, but I think Isiah Rodgers, he plays in the slot sometimes or full-time,
He does.
doesn't he? Yeah. So kind of filling that Byron Murphy role already a little bit. But I wouldn't be opposed for the Vikings re-signing Shaq Griffin too, as kind of like your veteran presence if Byron Murphy doesn't get re-signed either. If he goes elsewhere. But Shaq Griffin, I think, would be a good re-signing. Not terribly old either. I think just around 30 years old, somewhere around there. So
yeah. I was kind of closed off to bringing him back because I was totally committed to Murphy Jr. and then a youth movement behind him. But you're right. I think if you can't get Murphy Jr. to come back, I think falling back onto Shaq Griffin as sort of that, I guess what he would do is he would raise the floor of what the cornerback room could fall down to if the youngsters don't pan out, right? Because you could fall back onto Shaq Griffin and you're not going to be embarrassed with him. He's going to be fine. You're just hoping you can get up above that and be better than that with some of these other guys. But having Shaq Griffin there would certainly raise the floor. So I think there'd be a little bit of like a security blanket there if you could sign him if you don't get Murphy Jr. back under contract.
Mm-hmm. Drew, do you have any other points to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say too, kind of just judging on this corner market, it's kind of going insane too. I just feel like it's more of like the value too that it's just something I've definitely, I think it's for sure there now with the Moneyball approach kind of coming from that Deep Podesta tree and all from the Moneyball movie, but having them at 7.5 a year, average annual. And you got DJ Reed going to Detroit at $16 million, and Carlton Davis and Charvarius Ward signing for $20 million. I think just the value alone that money wise it brings in, you can kind of fill out your defense and go and get even bigger name guys. So a guy, signing a guy like Isiah Rodgers to be your CB2 can definitely open up like a Will Fries. We kind of mentioned him earlier, but Will Fries at a right guard, and you can really shore up those trenches and maybe even still have room for a Byron Murphy and maybe potentially a Cooper Kupp if he ends up being released, kind of reuniting him with Kevin O'Connell. So I just think with that, the financial value he brings to at being that number 2 corner can definitely make things really interesting, not only for this year, but even in the future years too, when those guys that are upcoming free agents, we don't really have a lot of guys that are big names that are free agents in the coming years. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how things play out with that too. So, I think that's kind of my 2 cents on that. So,
and you're right about that too. And so the way the Vikings are situated right now from a cap standpoint and the fact that their starting quarterback, JJ McCarthy, is going to be on a rookie contract, that puts them in a position of strength, not just to spend in free agency because you've got the cheap quarterback contract, but in the way you are able to move money around and structure these contracts, to your point, you can make it so that you never have a lot of key free agents in one year. You can stagger contracts, you can front load some, you can back load others, and you can plan out 26, 27, 28. Where are the big cap hits and at what positions? And let's stagger these so we're never desperate in any one year. And you can only do that when you sort of have a reset. And that's where the Vikings are right now. When they moved on from Kirk Cousins and signed a backup at a bargain, $10 million with Darnold last year, and then drafted their future starter. When you do that, you're able to reset it. It's what the Seattle Seahawks did when they built around Russell Wilson. It's what the Houston Texans are doing right now with CJ Stroud on a rookie contract. And you only have a few years to do that because eventually, if you're right on the quarterback, you're going to have to pay him. And so that's why it was so important, in my view, for the Vikings to go with McCarthy this year, because to put another year of McCarthy as a starter aside and splurge on the quarterback, you're just wasting that sort of financial advantage of a quarterback on a rookie deal. So I think you make some valid points there when it comes to planning out the roster and the big cap hits and staggering those years.
Yeah, speaking of quarterbacks, I think to get the obvious one out of the way, former Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold signed a 3-year, $110 million deal with the Seattle Seahawks.
Yep.
You know, a lot of Vikings fans weren't very keen on re-signing Darnold. You know, we were all probably like, hey, go get your bag. You know, it's not going to be in Minnesota. We won't know until maybe later. I don't know how much later, how much the Vikings offered him. So, you know, how are we feeling about Sam Darnold signing that 3-year deal with Seattle? You know, not many weapons to really throw to now with Lockett and Metcalf gone. You know, you got Jackson Smith-Njigba, which is, you know, still a good receiver, but I think that they're going to have to build a little bit more in Seattle.
Yep. I got to be honest, I was a little surprised. Now, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because as much as I appreciated what Sam Darnold did last year for the Vikings, he played great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not a big proponent of him as like having him be your guy.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't love it in an ideal world, but most teams are not in an ideal world. They got to figure something out, right? And so I really think this is a great deal for Seattle. I mean, Seattle's restarting. They are rebuilding from scratch. Lockett gone, Metcalf gone, a bunch of other veterans gone, traded Geno Smith. They're starting over, and John Schneider's done this. He did it with Russell Wilson. He's going to do it all over again. So the Seahawks are a team that they're going to draft a quarterback. If not this year, it's going to be next year. And Darnold's going to string them out. Now, if Darnold pops off again, maybe Seattle will stick with him. But from the Vikings standpoint, you know, I kind of thought they should have tried to orchestrate a tag and trade situation. And then when they weren't able, because to do that, you'd have to have the trade agreed to before you tag him, and whoever's acquiring him via that trade would have to have a deal worked out with him before he was tagged. Now, all that's out of order, and it requires some back channeling and some under the table stuff, but it happens. Now, obviously that didn't happen. The Vikings were not able to realize that type of scenario. But even after that was apparent, I kind of thought I should probably still tag him, because I think that someone will trade for him, because when the game of musical chairs ends, someone's not going to have a chair and they're going to trade for him. But I think I was wrong on that based on the contract he signed, because he signed well below the tag number, which tells me the market was not robust. And so, you know, I'll definitely own that one. And it looks to me like the Vikings played it right. I can't believe that Darnold's making what he's making while Jordan Love's making $55 million a year on average. Trevor Lawrence, 55 on average. Tua, 53 on average. Like, Kyler Murray's making 46 on average. And Darnold's down at 33, 34, 35. Like, to me, that's out of whack. But that's what the market bears, I guess. And so kudos to Seattle for pulling off what they pulled off. I think that Raiders-Seahawks trade was the rare one where I'm like, that's good for the Raiders and that's good for Seattle. Like, that's a good trade. And I guess no surprise, right? Because John Schneider and Pete Carroll worked together for a long time. No surprise that those two could come together to make a good trade that benefited both sides. I think the Vikings played the Darnold situation great. If they would have done what I said, they would have gotten it wrong. And I have no problem admitting that. So a nice job by Rob Brzezinski and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah playing the Darnold cards the way they did, and I'm excited for the situation the Vikings are in at quarterback and overall with the salary cap.
You know, I think it's fun in a way to be wrong about situations like this too, because you can kind of see how things play out, and you know, sometimes it's for the better, sometimes in rare cases it's for the worse. But for right now, it's for the better, and we have our future quarterback one on the roster, and JJ McCarthy. You know, going into his, I guess, rookie quote unquote years. So I don't know. I'm excited about JJ McCarthy. Last training camp I was there for all the days except one of them, so I've seen a lot of McCarthy. He looked ready to play, and I think he'll be ready to play this upcoming season without any major setbacks this offseason. So yeah, we'll see how McCarthy plays this year. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. You know, I think there's something about, like, there's two things that I'll say about him that's kind of hard to put your finger on it. I don't like, he's not like a big guy. Okay. And maybe this is shallow of me, but like, I don't love that. Like, I wish he had more of a presence to him, more of a dominant presence. And I just don't think he has that. Now, maybe he'll grow into his frame and he'll become that, but I don't think he's quite there. So I don't like that. The thing I do like, though, is I think he's got intangibles, like an unbelievable amount of intangibles. Like, I think he's got leadership. I think he's fearless. I think he's a great athlete. So all of that I really like, and I think that supersedes the fact that I don't love his frame. And so I'm 2 thumbs up on McCarthy, and I'm excited to watch him play as well. And he's got a great infrastructure in Minnesota with an improving offensive line, a great head coach and play caller and play designer, and amazing weapons.
Yeah, I think just to kind of further your point a little bit more about the whole the frame thing is with a guy like McCarthy too, and you have Jaden Daniels. He doesn't have the biggest frame in the world, and Lamar Jackson really doesn't have the biggest frame in the world either. So, and the good thing is we're starting to see that more of those slimmer guys really start to pan out, not only at like quarterback, but even at receiver too. We're seeing a lot more slim guys. So, and I think that's, if there's any worry about, I think that is something you can kind of point to and say, okay, well, this is promising for this team. This is promising for this team. So why can't it work for us as well?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Other free agents too that have been signed elsewhere is safety Cam Bynum, a fan favorite, signed a $6 million deal for 4 years with the Colts. Like I said, fan favorite safety. I mean, there's a handful of fans that didn't like Cam Bynum either, but I was one of those fans that really liked Cam Bynum. It's tough to see him go. I don't know how you replace a guy like that. I mean, Theo Jackson, with the contract that he got, the extension, is he, the next safety for the Vikings? Are we going to be in that bidding war and win that bidding war with Javon Holland? Is that going to be our next safety? Mike, how do you see the safety room shaking out for the Vikings? I know Harrison Smith may or may not be back, contemplating retirement. How do we see this playing out?
What I expect to happen is for Harrison Smith to be back as a starter, for Theo Jackson and Josh Metellus to basically both play split starter reps, but oftentimes there'll be a 3 safety package on the field. That's what I expect to happen. If the Vikings are in on Javon Holland or another high-priced free agent safety, that's their prerogative, and they know more about it than I do, and I'm here to watch it and support it. I don't think that's where they're going. And if I was in the room with them, I would not advocate for paying a safety a whole bunch of money. I think that's a position where you platoon it, you get by with it, you bargain price it a little bit. Not that Harrison Smith is on a bargain price, but he's kind of a legacy player. I just don't love paying safety premium money. Now, are there exceptions? Certainly there are exceptions. Derwin James, I would probably pay him. But Harrison Smith, definitely you pay him in his prime. But as a matter of principle, I don't love paying safeties. So I expect them to go with Theo Jackson, Metellus, and Harrison Smith. I don't think they'd be in on Javon Holland, but maybe I'm wrong. And I won't be surprised if they draft one later in the draft to get another Metellus type player that you can develop, and another Theo Jackson type player that you can develop and eventually turn into a starter. That's how I see it going. Doesn't mean I'm right, but that's sort of my sense on things. How about you guys?
Drew, I'll have you go first on this one.
I could definitely see it too. I think for a guy to be paid, I feel like it's kind of becoming more like the new running backs of the defense a little bit.
Yep.
They're really not getting paid the 20s, the 30s of the millions of dollars like some other premium positions are. And I think another one you can kind of point to is linebacker as well. And, unfortunately, we don't have any guys. Fortunately, we don't have guys leaving for that. But I think those are like the 2 positions where a lot of GMs and coaches can point to. They're like, this is kind of a replaceable position. And, they unless they're guys like a Fred Warner or, those big Roquan Smiths, you don't really want to trade or let leave. Fortunately for us, the Roquan thing worked out because he went to the AFC. But, you guys, you really don't want those kind of guys like walking out. And then those are the kinds of guys you want to pay. But, a guy like Javon Holland, I think what the intrigue could be is just the versatility he brings, because he can be a punt returner. He's got very good vision. After an interception, he can kind of wind himself through that defense, maybe turn just a regular interception do a pick six. So I think that could be the intrigue with them. But I think now that we've got Theo Jackson, especially for what we're paying him at $6 million, I think I'd be more comfortable playing Theo Jackson this upcoming season. And like you said, just drafting another guy maybe in like the 4th, 5th rounds and see if those guys hit.
Yeah, the Vikings have a lot of, I won't say a lot, but they've had recent success with their current room of safeties. Not a whole lot of free agent visits or I guess signings besides Theo Jackson. A guy like Josh Metellus that started off on special teams and has worked his way up to now a chess piece in this defense, playing linebacker, slot corner, safety, defensive end. He's been everywhere on that field. And then you've had your cornerstone in Harrison Smith. I think it'd be interesting to see how the Vikings go about, this next couple weeks in free agency and then in the draft as well. Just to see how high they go with taking a safety in the draft. With their 3-4 picks, whatever they have, maybe more. So I don't know. I think it's kind of like a wait and see thing what they do with safety. I'm fine. I guess I'm content with the safety room right now, but I would like to see a name or two added, whether that's free agency or in the draft.
Yeah. More of a luxury than a need is what I always say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and then Pat Jones. Drew can talk about Pat Jones.
Yeah, Patrick Jones, kind of that edge 3, edge 4 kind of guy. Definitely a good rotational player for us. One of the last players of the Spielman era. Going to the Panthers 2 years on a $20 million contract, and definitely opens up the door for Dallas Turner to be that true, rotational one player opposite of Van Ginkel and Grenard. So what are your thoughts on the Pat Jones deal and what it kind of means for Dallas Turner going into next year?
Right. Yeah, man, it's a good one. And it's like, I don't even think that's too much for him. You got 3 guys that need to play. They all should play 60% of the snaps. And if that happens, you're going to pay Pat Jones $10 million a year now to play, 10 or 15% of this. It's too bad. It's like, it's seriously like an embarrassment of riches at edge for the Vikings. Right. I mean, and it's like, if there was no cap, if this was baseball, you'd re-sign him and just stash him.
Oh yeah.
I think it's too bad. And it's also one of those where, if you had him under contract and you were entering the regular season, so you just went through camp, you just went through the preseason, you'd probably trade him. You'd flip him for something that you needed. Because he's a hell of a player, and he plays like he's always hungry, and he plays like he's playing for his lunch. And I love that about him. So you hate seeing him go, the other team got a good one. And that it's not even like, oh, it's too much for him. Geez, see you later. Good riddance. It's like, dang, that's about right for him. So it's a tough one to see go out the door, I think.
Yeah. I think it kind of, those indirect trades, it helps the comp formula. So a lot of the posts on Over the Cap are saying this is probably about a 5th round pick in the compensatory pool for 2026. And, I think there's a lot of good players still out there that can help contribute to that as well. I think the next big name that we might see is Cam Robinson. If he gets 20-25 mil a year, it can definitely be a 3rd round comp pick, and things are definitely looking good in that scenario as well. So we could be having a pool of riches in the 26 class to help kind of replace these players that are walking out the door too, and maybe we'll replace them with even better or just as good. So,
I thought Cam Robinson was going to sign with the Chiefs, but they went with.
I know that's what I kind of thought too.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty interesting. Now, before we get to the last 2 here. Is there any other free agents that you guys are kind of like on your wish list for the Vikings to sign that are still out there, whether that's defensive tackle, outside of Jonathan Allen? Let's just say he's signed and he's ready to go. Outside of him, what are some other free agents that you guys, have on your wish list or your big board per se?
Did the Commanders receiver Brown sign anywhere yet?
Yes.
Yeah, he's going to Jacksonville.
That's a good one. I like that one for them.
Mm-hmm.
He was on my list. I liked him a lot. I like Darius Slayton a lot as well, but I thought he might get a little too spendy for the Vikings. I don't love guys. Naylor, I don't want to get rid of Jalen Naylor, but I don't want to I don't want to give him WR3 uncontested. I want him to compete for that. And so it doesn't have to be Cooper Kupp, but I thought someone along those lines would be appropriate. Darius Slayton, Brown from Washington, someone like that. I think I would put on my wish list. And I think the Vikings should have tight end. I think they got to find another tight end or two. So those are two areas I would take a look at in free agency.
Drew, what about you?
So I think it would be nice for me. I really want to build up these trenches. So either that's assuming they sign Jonathan Allen. I'd like another player opposite of Harrison Phillips as well, and you can maybe rotate Jalen Redmond in on certain passing down situations. I think that's where he really thrives in. You can get another guard, like a left guard, opposite of Ryan Kelly for 2025. But one I think that is very under the radar. Wobby kind of stole it from me a little bit with the tight end, but really, really deep in my bag here. Former Viking Michael Pruitt with Johnny Munt walking out of the building, getting that third blocking tight end would be really nice, especially if we're going to be looking at running back in this draft. Can definitely be used in those goal line scenarios too. So nice. I guess the really deep sleeper for me could be Michael Pruitt, and maybe he'll come back to where it all started with the Vikings, a decade or so ago. So that's another one. I love it. Looking at too.
He's a good dude too. I was there with the team still when we drafted him and he was playing, and I liked him a lot. Good dude, and I think he can get the work done down in the trenches in the goal line, and then you can sneak him out in a route every now and then as well. So that would be a good one, man. That's good call.
Yeah.
I was always a big Michael Pruitt guy, and I feel like Michael Pruitt. I don't know, Wobby, if you've ever done the immaculate grids where you can pick a player. I feel like he's like a good sneaky guy to pick for one of those. He's just the type of player to have.
Yeah. I love that. That's good.
I always run with him and Kari Blossom game when it's like Bears and Vikings or something, or Eagles and Vikings. So those are definitely some good ones. Even Shannon Sullivan's a good Eagles Vikings one too, because a lot of people forget he played for Philly too. So
hey, now you got Isiah Rodgers.
Yep, now you got him as well. So that's definitely
Anthony Harris, my guy Anthony Harris.
Yep, there you go.
True.
Andrew Sendejo.
Yeah.
All right. The last two free agents that the Vikings have let go. Too bad we couldn't really talk about all the ones that we have signed because there's only two of them. But the last two that the Vikings have let go were Nick Mullins and Johnny Munt, both signed with the Jaguars, 2-year deals. Wobby, how are we feeling about Nick Mullins signing, and then our guy Johnny Munt, the best third string tight end in the league per KOC?
Yeah, I mean, those two losses, I'd say, Munt definitely needs to be replaced with a similar type of player, Michael Pruitt, someone like that. Mullins to me is awesome if you've got Darnold or Cousins. But if you have J.J. McCarthy, a first-year starter, I don't love Mullins. I love Mullins from a clipboard holding standpoint and a second set of eyes for McCarthy, but I don't love Mullins for McCarthy's out for 6 games. We got to go 3-3 here. I don't think Mullins is doing that for you. So I'm fine with Mullins leaving. The Vikings, I think, need to go high-end-ish at QB2 here. I cannot be a write-in candidate or, a 5th-round pick. It's to me, it's got to be someone on the market who's going to command a salary, $10-12 million salary like Darnold did last year. And obviously the Vikings are very pleased that they went that route last year, because look what happened. And I'm not suggesting that they need to find someone who can go 14-3. They got to find someone who they know can go 3-3 over a 6-game stretch, or 4-2 over a 6-game stretch. And I think that guy is out there. They just got to find him, and then they got to pay for him. It might be Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew, a guy like that. But I don't think Mullins is good enough to be McCarthy's backup in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah. And I feel like, too, for quarterback, you can even look at somebody from another team as well. Like I was just kind of looking at some list of players. Some guy I kind of caught my eye was Jacoby Brissett. I think, if I remember correctly, I think there was some interest in trading for Brissett when Kirk Cousins went down in 23 to be the starter to finish up the season. So I think Jacoby Brissett could be an interesting one, a guy that's kind of been around the league. I think he's really smart as a player, and I think that's a big reason why he's been sticking around for so long. Or you can even go with a guy who has winning caliber, playoff experience, and a guy like Joe Flacco as well could step in if you need him to survive you a game or so. I think those are some guys you could definitely look at too.
Yeah, it's you got to thread something, right? Because it's got to be a guy where it's like, yeah, he's good enough to play and win for us, but it has to be like an absolute no doubt not challenging McCarthy. So like that's kind of a narrow gap to hit, but that's I think what you got to do. And not that McCarthy's ego would be damaged, but you just it's just a distraction. If you can just avoid it. It's not a guy who's going to challenge him. It's a guy who can step in and stem the tide for a month if we need him.
Yeah. And he's already been through so much already, even like dating back to the Michigan days with Cade McNamara. So I think he would, I think now he's in a position where he wants the starting job. I feel like it's his and he wants it. So I don't think he wants to be sitting around. So I think that's a great point.
Awesome. Well, I think that will just about do it. If you guys have any other closing points, feel free to make them. Wobby, do you have anything else that you would like to add before we top this show off?
I think I think we hit on all the sort of pertinent issues. I think maybe there's a slight undercurrent of dissatisfaction or impatience with the lack of like big splashy signings and expenditure. But I think overall Vikings fans are pretty reasoned and are feeling okay about where things are because they see some of the money being spent on players that they haven't heard of or that they don't think are very good. And they're kind of like, I'm glad we're not doing that. So, I think things are fine here. I think the Vikings front office is doing a very, very good job of managing all of this. And I think the other thing to remember is you can carry cap space forward into future years and you can re-sign players, you can restructure, you can extend that, all of that. And so I'm cool with where the Vikings are at. I think they have more work to do, but I don't think that work needed to be done on day one of the tampering window. I think they're in a solid position. I think there are a couple of key areas they need to hit. And the other thing is they're marrying whatever their draft philosophy and strategy is married to the free agent philosophy. And we aren't going to know what their draft philosophy is until they do it. And once that gets done is when we can fully critique how free agency went.
Sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is when you see the Bears are making all these moves, they're getting Jonah Jackson, Joe Tooney, and Drew Dahlman. And it's like, we were kind of not promised, but just more like Kevin O'Connell saying, yeah, our trenches are an issue. And then all you're getting is Isiah Rodgers and Bubba Bolden. And, they're fine signings. But when you say, yeah, this is an issue and we need to address it. And I think Vikings fans are waiting for that. So, and I think the Ryan Kelly one kind of puts them at ease for day one. I think once the Jonathan Allen, or if the Jonathan Allen one comes in, I think that'll fully be one where the Viking fans could sit back and just be like, all right, we're good. And just take it in, and everything else is just the cherry on top to a free agency. So I think the Jonathan Allen one is just the big domino to fall. And once that kind of goes through, we'll all be good. So,
yep. Well said.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hopefully the Vikings can sign maybe another guy or two in the next week or a couple days at least. But thank you, Wobby, for joining the show tonight. Would love to have you on again sometime. I know tonight was kind of all over the place with free agents and all that fun stuff. It's always fun talking about free agents, though. So,
yep. Absolutely. Would love to do it again. Let's do it before the draft, maybe.
For sure. Yeah, make sure you guys subscribe to Believe in Vikings down in the description below. Listen to Wobby. Great stuff. I know a lot of you have listened to him and followed him, in the Vikings VN days. So great stuff. Was dreaming about this day too. So.
Oh man, right. I appreciate that. It was fun. I'm glad you guys invited me. Thanks for reaching out and doing so. And like I said, man, let's do it again before, or maybe after the draft, we can react to it, but whatever. And then I'd love to have you guys on my show as well. So it'd be a lot of fun to talk Vikings with you on mine.
For sure. And then before we end this too, I do want to ask you a couple questions after we end the show.
Oh yeah. Sounds good, man.
Awesome. Well, if you guys did enjoy this show, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Skol Vikes.